treatment and prevention side of the equation here at Cornell with our Cornell Health Eating Program, as well as obviously within athletics. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Had an opportunity, like Jay said, to go work in Las Vegas at the UFC Performance Institute. So quite a pivot from eating disorder treatment, obviously doing sports nutrition as well, but then working with UFC fighters competing for world championships and the stressors that requires and working within a high performance environment. At Virginia Tech, we work really hard to blend those experiences into what we provide to our student athletes at Virginia Tech. Right, so that's really going to be kind of a summary of my career thus far, is being able to try to blend these oftentimes competing priorities of how do we support and empower those athletes that may be struggling or at risk for eating disorder and body image dysfunction with also eliciting high performance. Right, so obviously we have a kind of an inclination that's going to be largely female athletes, but there's obviously crossover to all of our athletes and thinking about how do we balance these oftentimes competing priorities. Apologies if this is a little bit small, but our core vision and value within my sports nutrition department at Virginia Tech is ED, eating disorder eating, informed nutrition care to ensure healthful participation in sport while eliciting championship level performances. We got to perform, but we also want to do it on a really strong foundation of self-empowerment and health and well-being. This is going to be kind of the framework that I taught today. These are the domains that we need to be considerate of as we build and as we consider blending these two competing priorities. I built this presentation, admittedly, for more of a nutrition and dietetics audience. So I'm going to obviously emphasize different things and may work quicker through some slides than others. But this is the framework that I consider critical to building a solid foundation. We haven't figured it out. This is iterative. We continue to investigate. We continue to be self-reflective. My colleagues and counterparts here at Cornell are doing the same thing. We had a great 2-hour discussion yesterday around a lot of these principles and concepts. And that's how we continue to move forward. It starts with mindset. It starts with my perspective, my vision, my values. Right? If that isn't in alignment, a lot of what Dr. Shelley just shared resonates with me. If my values aren't aligning to this and I'm sacrificing my student athlete well-being and some of the considerations, particularly around eating disorder risk, then I'm not going to be constructing this, right? You move on to the next thing because this isn't for you. But if I have the values and the vision and the perspective, then I can educate myself. I can educate my team, our culture, and then we can execute. And that's really the 3 stages of this presentation. You'll notice this is going to be up in the upper right corner to kind of highlight which phase we're in. So one of the things that we have a lot of experience with here at Cornell is the body positive, right? So worked really hard with a program called the Body Positive. It's a weight neutral, non-weight based wellness initiative that essentially is body self-empowerment. And it kind of has some, I guess, language that is very abstract. And so when people hear about body positivity, we almost think about, okay, then performance is not relevant. Well, of course it is, right? And so we're fighting the stigma that these body positive initiatives may bring up in a lot of people, and I'm going to talk about some of these biases. But there's 2 main validated programs, and at Virginia Tech, Hokie Wellness does the Body Project, which is one of the other more developed, widespread programs. The Body Positive, what we have at Cornell, and then the Body Project is what we have at Virginia Tech. The Body Positive is they're both evidence-based. We did some research here. Incredible outcomes that not only did body positive and mental health measures improve while individuals participated in the program, but 6 months after, they would continue to be improved, which is incredible. Right? But to summarize it, my experience within the Body Positive, it's about self-compassion. Right? If we can have more self-compassion, we can continue to build our resilience, our mental toughness, all the things that are critical for performance, and particularly if we are whole in our body. And this is a big part of it, self-compassion. How is body dissatisfaction forming an athlete? away from the self-care that supports maximizing. How far are we pulling ourselves away from our potential? Right? So this is kind of the crux for me. If I was to whittle the entire six-week program down into kind of a summary statement, this is kind of how I would define it. There's a concept in eating disorder treatment and in kind of the body self-empowerment programs called health at every size. This was extremely triggering for a lot of athletic people that participated in the program. Is health at every size. Well, if I'm obese, I'm not healthy, right? There's a lot of kind of cognitive dissonance there. And in an athletic world, there are body types that maybe aren't going to perform as well, or body shapes and sizes. But we need to be reflective of the fact that sometimes those are out of our control, right? How my body weight and my body composition adapts is not always within my control. Oftentimes it is, and we'll talk a lot about body composition as we go. But for me, I would frame it in a performance setting as performance regardless of size. Not health at every size, but performance regardless of size. I need to focus on the foundational, fundamental inputs and allow my body to adapt to meet its potential, right? Moving towards our maximum potential. Body image itself is an incredibly abstract and hard concept for a lot of people to recognize. Body image is not how my body projects out into the world, it's how I feel about it, right? There might be somebody that's objectively beautiful, supermodel, whatever it may be, that has horrible body image and feels really terrible about themselves in general. Right? Changing your body in a way that may align with performance goals or may align with societal beauty standards does not necessarily improve your body image. Okay, so it's a really abstract framework, paradigm. You guys can't see this, but it's on a spectrum. Okay, on the right side, it's called body liberation. And this is kind of a philosophy that there is kind of some literature around this. Body liberation is like free, not afflicted or affected by how your body looks. Really, this is like the gold standard, right? But on the other side is body hate and dislike, right? Somebody who despises their body, there's a lot of reasons why somebody may, right? Injury can be something that contributes, right? That, trauma is a big part of a lot of people's lived experiences. LGBTQ community has a lot of reasons that they may be uncomfortable in their body, right? Just societal stigma. The goal is not necessarily to move all the way to body liberation, but if you can move to the right on the spectrum, then we're hoping to empower you to get closer to your maximum potential. If you can be more comfortable in how you move around the world, that you're able to fuel yourself in a way that is more in alignment with your performance goals and values. Talking about self-care, right? Self-care is really critical and is at the heart of what I'm trying to support my student athletes to be able to achieve. Self-care comes from a lot of different places. It's that physical health. You see that oftentimes, that's the superficial level of performance, but we know there's a lot more to that. It's the mental health. Mental health and mental performance are very intimately linked, but also distinct. So social health, how are my relationships? How are my friends and those that are going to influence my lived experience? Financial health, we know how important food insecurity can be, just overall financial insecurity in terms of being able to show up and be present for training and competition. You see that affecting athletes at Virginia Tech, less on the food security side, but maybe some of the pressures of NIL, of rev share, the expectations that are put on them at that point, not becoming professional athletes. And then, countless other areas of health, including spiritual health. So self-care is a foundational part of this. Weight and body composition is something that we oftentimes use as a de facto measure of fitness, of preparedness, of living these kind of lifestyles. And that's not always the case. There's a reality that body composition contributes to performance, right? It's physics. If I have more lean mass as a relationship of my overall mass and I'm a distance athlete, it's physical, it's work. I gotta move my body around a course or a track or along a pool, and it's physics. If I gotta pole walk or jump, it's physics. But getting leaner does not equate to being better, right? So we need to think about how do these contribute. Is it a direct relationship? If I get leaner, then I'm faster? Or is it more indirect because I'm living a lifestyle that my performance lifestyles are improving, I'm sleeping, I'm eating strategically, I'm recovering, I have good social relationships, and then I'm able to adapt in a way that allows my body to get leaner, right? My allostatic stress is reduced. So now my leanness is increased and now I'm faster. You also see somebody that may have like a decrease in their body composition, increased fat, and still performs better, right? There's a lot of contributors to performance. That body composition is a metric that may be valuable to measure, but we need to keep it in context to how does it actually contribute to performance. I think about weight and body composition as dependent variables. I've seen a lot of athletes starve themselves and gain weight. I've seen other athletes strategically eat more and lean up and lose weight, right? And so body composition and weight, to some degree, are dependent variables of all of those other factors that I just talked about. Does that resonate for y'all? So what does actually drive sustainable performance? This is a model that I included in a lot of my initial engagements with my student athletes. Certainly I bring this up with my staff a lot, is performance lifestyles are at the foundation of performance development. UFC, we are providing high performance resources, bespoke, personalized care. But if we're doing that in performance lifestyles don't exist, meaning energy availability, sleep, recovery, positive social life, right? That's nightlife, that's social, relationship health, all of those things. Those performance lifestyles aren't there at the foundation. This is incredibly fragile. Right? We need to make sure that energy availability is strategic, is enough and strategic, periodized. We'll talk about that a little bit. We need to make sure that mental health is on a solid foundation. We make sure that eating disorder risk and bone injury and menstrual health are all taken care of, kind of a do no harm approach before we start moving into conversations around periodization, around body composition and performance, around some of the things that we may want to tackle as a high performance kind of practitioner. We need to make sure that those foundational pieces are set first. When we talk about body composition analysis and body composition in general, I think of it as a kind of a three-tier system. Body composition is a third tier. First tier is how are we performing? How are we showing up on the court and field, on the mat, in the pool? How's your energy? How's your speed? How's your recovery? How's your resilience out there, right? Physically and mentally. Second tier is how are you showing up in this space, in sports science and strength and conditioning, in those metrics and kind of secondary considerations that are going to translate, we hope, right? You guys work very strategically to deliver a stimulus, a stressor that's going to translate to the field of play. How are you showing up here? Sports science has been really helpful in collecting information that allows us to understand how's the CNS response, how's the training going, how are all these things showing up. And then the third tier, because it's such a response to all these other training stimulus, training and lifestyle exposures, is body composition. And if we could think of it as kind of that third tier, then maybe we're not thinking about, okay, if I want to get faster, let's get leaner. Right? That's very often the coach's response. I want to get faster. I want to jump higher. I work with volleyball. I want to jump higher. So critical for the sport of volleyball to jump high. I got to get leaner. I got to tell you, in the fifth set of a competitive match, it doesn't really matter how high you jumped in the first set. How can we be resilient to the stressors of a game? And really what matters to win that conference title is how high do you jump the 60th time, right? Or in a tournament, the 200th time after a bunch of games. Right? So those are the considerations around body composition. Can be a measurement of all of the different things that we do, but it's not an indication of fitness or capacity to perform. Right? So I just want to contextualize that before we get into that. So, to body comp or not to body comp? That is the question, right? That is kind of $1 million question within collegiate sport in particular. And I do have this asterisk, it's like independent of weight-making sports. I work intimately with wrestling and obviously the UFC. If I have a volleyball player that weighs themselves daily, my red flags go off a little bit. I'm like, okay, let's talk more about that. What do you need to know? What emotional response are you getting? If I have a wrestler that won't weigh themselves, minimum 3-4 times a week, tell me what's going on. Why are you not weighing yourself? We need to be strategic and scientific about it. So these considerations are a little bit inverted for our weight class. To body comp, what's the team culture? What's the coach influence? What's the overall culture around body composition? How are we talking about food and body? What's the cost benefit? Harm reduction is a really critical consideration here. If team culture is not great, and I'll use the volleyball example as we go, but if team culture is not there, then body composition is probably going to add gasoline to the fire. If team culture is in a good spot, where we can start talking about this as a performance variable, then let's use it and let's use language around it that's going to reinforce how we see performance as this holistic approach. Okay. How is the data shared? I'm going to talk about that as well. What interest does the coach have? Are they influencing these conversations and these discussions? Are they talking about body and body composition? Are they reflecting either directly or abstractly about this? Because that is certainly going to be internalized by our athletes. Concept of how are we determining if an athlete is getting body comp, right? You can understand how, especially a female athlete is going to respond if a coach says, go talk to your dietitian and get your body comp done, right? Or how is that going to be interpreted? So is this an opt-out policy where the team expectation is everybody body comps, and if you have some underlying concern, talk to the dietitian, and maybe you don't need to do it? Well, the burden is on the athlete to make that decision and have a hard conversation, and they may or may not be ready or able to do. We're resourced with 7 dietitians at Virginia Tech. We're very, very fortunate. 1,100 student athletes for a list. Very different concept of go find time to speak with your dietitian, right? We're much more embedded than somebody at a Cornell would. So these are all just various considerations around body comp. Alternative to an opt-out policy is an opt-in policy, right? If an athlete wants to get a body composition done, they opt in. Now that can take a lot of different shapes and forms. I'm going to use my volleyball example. I started working with volleyball at Virginia Tech 3 years ago when I got there. Team culture was not great around food and body. Didn't even bring body composition assessment. We use a bod at Virginia Tech. Didn't even bring it into the fold. Not a consideration. We're going to focus on the fundamentals, the bottom row there. Energy availability, name of the game. We're not even talking about periodization. We've got to eat enough to meet the work requirements. Okay? Team culture is improving. Year 2, start to think about it. We have a couple athletes that might be appropriate. So do a couple body comps. About this time last year, end of the spring, feeling pretty good about where we are. Let's connect what body composition's relation to performance looks like. Coach Lowe, my strength coach that works with volleyball, she's creating a lot of stimulus that's going to create an adaptation, with body composition and obviously and hopefully on the courts. So let's assess how are your lifestyles, how's your training, how's your recovery, how are all of the stressors that we're creating, adapting, creating adaptations into your body. So let's have an opt-in policy. My volleyball players, here's the opportunity, here's what we're looking for. We're really focused on lean mass. How is your lean mass adapting to your fueling, your training, and your recovery? About 2/3 of the team opted in. For the first 6 months, offered it in the end of the spring, after the season, in the winter, and now at the end of the spring, and we have 100% interest in conducting. We had 100% uptake in body composition assessment within our volleyball team. Okay. Link the data to what are we trying to accomplish, and then how do we do it? Are we focusing on body fat percentage? Absolutely not. Do I have some athletes that have worked with body concerns? Yeah. And so those athletes, we're going to have conversations about what does this data mean. We're going to have a negotiation about what metrics we disclose to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. Contrast that to the softball team that I get to work with. Opt-in policy, we have less access to that team. They're slightly removed from our facility. They come into strength and conditioning. It's not as connected. Provide an opt-in. We have about 5 girls that do it. They're really focused on their lean mass. Again, focus on the positive outcomes rather than focusing on the negative, which would be body fat percentage that can have that toxic effect. Who needs to see the data? And I'll talk about this as well. As we talk about weight and body composition, I think it's important to highlight the biases that we have. I talk about the health at every size and biases that we have in the health in fitness industry, right? All of us are kind of in that space. What biases do we have around body composition, around weight? And there's a lot of data that shows that we are among the most biased group in society, right? We hold people to a standard. We know what a good athlete looks like, right? We use the eye test maybe more than we should. This article, 5 ways parental body image issues potentially harm their children. We know the familial impact of body dissatisfaction, of negative body image, and negative body talk. It gets passed down largely from mother to daughter. Exploring weight bias, fat phobia, and diversity among collegiate athletic coaches. We've all heard the coach that has maybe projected onto their athlete with a team. And it's not just coaches and parents and strength coaches, dietitians are very guilty of this as well. So we all need to just be reflective of how do our weight biases affect the athletes and the teams that we work with. Self-awareness is really critical amongst the healthcare providers. Sizeism, how does that show up? That's a not only weight and body composition, but there's like healthism is kind of a new framing of like shaming people for having poor health, and obviously there's a lot of social determinants of health, right? Poverty, low SES, a lot of those food access issues are going to impact health. How does the athletes we serve, and then how does our internal dialogue transfer to our athletes? The language we use is critically important in how we communicate about these to set that team culture. Do a lot of work to reinforce positive language around this. At Virginia Tech, we had an initiative just kind of within our eating disorder leadership group, and I'll share some frameworks up. But at Cornell, we did a really amazing, this was a student-driven campaign, and my wife and I, she was an athletic trainer and turned academic support. I got the opportunity to contribute to the We Don't Say campaign. We don't say things about other people's bodies because how you look is not defined as your form. So this is a really awesome, this was an amazing opportunity for my wife and I to be able to contribute to that campaign. So how do we take proactive steps here? Celebrate size and body diversity, right? Acknowledge that everybody's going to perform in a different body shape and size. Right? That's beautiful. Oh, sorry. Tracking and monitoring of body comp trends, especially fat-free mass, lean body mass, can be really instructive. But we also have to fight against that preoccupation with body fat percentage. Just to reinforce, it's an indicator of performance lifestyles, training, fueling, sleeping. Is this an accountability measure? Does an athlete, will they respond well to an accountability piece? Oftentimes coaches want body comp done so that the athlete is accountable. Is that healthy and constructive? Oftentimes not. Is this an opportunity for an athlete to have a check-in around how their performance lifestyles are contributing? Maybe they don't know. Maybe they need a motivation for internal drive and motivation around some of these things. Maybe it opens up a conversation around sleep cycle, sleep, late night behavior patterns. So once again, it's a way to assess lifestyle. This framework, this philosophy is less of a policy at Virginia Tech and more of a personal philosophy around how do we how do I consider sharing of sensitive information, body composition as an example? We have, again, I've tiered it. We have tier 1, which is body composition driven sports. So at Virginia Tech, I would consider that wrestling, football, football to a large degree, as a body composition driven sport where if we have data around body composition, that data can be instructive not only for us as dietitians, as us as performance staff, but potentially the coach as well. So this data, with informed consent from the student athlete, could be really instructive to a sport coach even, as well as the performance staff, to have some insight as to how the body composition is adapting over time. The next tier is low body composition focused sports, so this would be largely men's sports. I like to contrast men's soccer versus women's soccer. This would be a men's soccer. Right? We can objectively look at the body composition data to a different degree than we can with our women. And we can look at trends over time and see how individuals are adapting. We can be aware of too low a body composition for resilience factor. Right? Oftentimes we're looking at too over lean versus over fat. Right? Thinking about how are we creating resilience within our student athletes. And then that tier 3 is our more highly focused body composition sport, or body-focused sports, and this is largely going to be our women's sports. And these are individuals that we need to be sensitive to how we provide and present this information. I have countless examples, and I have a very specific volleyball player that I work with now that has worked through a lot of her personal challenges. That at a previous institution, the girls would all go get body comps. They'd get a printout, they would compare, and then they would compete with AU symptoms, right? That is negligence from my perspective. We need to monitor, we need to manage that information and how it's shared in a way that is constructive and positive towards all of the things that we talked about. I'm going to get right into some dashboards that we built out in Teamworks AMS. I don't work for Teamworks AMS, I don't work for Teamworks, but this is what we've been able to do. So this is our highly focused body composition athlete. And I know you can't see it in the back, and I can share my slides. So on this dashboard, we have the weight sensitive sport, low weight sensitive, unfiltered, and then team trends, just kind of on our banner there. And this, when I pull it up on Teamworks AMS, all this shows, because I might have an athlete looking over my shoulder, the only thing that pops up, fat-free mass. This is positive. We almost always want to see an increase in fat-free mass. It means we're training hard, it means we're recovering, it means we're laying down muscle. So we can see fat-free mass over time. Okay? I can click that drop-down button on the right, and then I can see, okay, what is our body fat change over time? So if I want to unlock one more data point, it does not show body fat percentage, like what is the trend? So this athlete, first one is baseline, next one, no change, a little bit of increase, a little bit of decrease, and so we could just see trends, right? Trends are instructive. If we give them a number, they're going to get obsessive. Yes?
What's your best tool for fat-free mass?
I mean, the gold standard is going to be a DEXA scheme, right? At UFC, we had a DEXA. Our football program at Virginia Tech is considering, but we have all these radiology considerations. We use a bot pod at Virginia Tech. Bioelectrical impedance is what we use here. Use what you can if it makes sense, right? With the awareness that there's going to be there's measurement there, right? So getting consistent markers, measurements is going to be important to create trends, right? That's really what we're looking at. This is our next year. This is like the men's soccer example that I gave. But we can talk about some more metrics. We can talk about weight perhaps. But as I do the drop down, the top one, we can still have just fat-free mass displayed. When I drop it down, I have body weight as a number, and the other one, there's no body weight consideration, right? This is more of like a blind weight type scenario, the first one. This one is body weight trend, body fat change, and then percent body fat, right? So we're now including some percent body fat into the equation in the discussion. The first thing that my men's soccer players come out of the body, all right, what was my number? Well, what number, right? There's a lot of numbers, but I know what number they're, right? They want the body fat percentage. And yeah, they're comparing. Is it healthy for them to compare? Probably not, and I want to work away from that, but they are sharing. right? They're sharing those numbers, and we want to work away from comparison. Right? There's a lot of difference between sports and sport culture. Understanding these is really critical. And then, of course, we need to be great at nutrition. Other gender differences, other considerations, there's going to be different things. Yeah.
I've been concerned about this for about 2 years with NIL. That LSU gymnast girl, she's on Baywatch now, and I worry about this. I'm worried that NIL, especially on the female athlete side,
It's about marketing, self-marketing.
I love what you guys are doing, but I just see this thing coming, like that Indiana Jones with the ball going at it. Yeah, am I wrong on that? It just
Not in the least. And we dealt with this a lot at the UFC with a lot of our female fighters being like bikini models. And that's what it turns to, particularly on the female athlete side. Marketability drives NIL contracts, somewhat independent to performance. And so it is a huge consideration when there's money, when there's marketing, self-marketing, self-promotion, and social media involved. It is a real consideration. And I don't think I would change anything that I've said so far, but we need to be heightened sensitivity to that. Continue to link back to performance, back to self-care, because you can potentially manage all of these and still market yourself in a productive way. Like, we need to make sure that we're anchored in those performance lifestyles first and foremost. The priorities may shift in a way that is outside of our control. All I can do is continue to reinforce it. But that's a really great point. Physiology. So on one end of the spectrum is nutrition counseling, anchoring down for me and my staff and my profession, anchoring down in this. Equally important is leaning into the physiology. I had the privilege of getting my master's degree at Ithaca College. Dr. Shelley was one of my professors back in 2003. Everybody alive in 2003, I hope. Okay. It's not 1965 or whatever it was. So physiology is near and dear to my heart. If I'm providing a nutrition prescription, eat X number of carbs, dose your protein, whatever it may be, if I'm making that recommendation without a deep understanding of the physiological action when that food and the training stimulus are interacting and interfacing, then I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm yelling into a canyon, but there's no response, right? So I need to have a deep understanding of the psychological behavioral health side, but I also need to have on the other end of the spectrum, this is kind of the performance side and the connection that I'm going to lean into for the rest of the presentation, is leaning into the physiology. I need to understand what happens to the carbohydrates when it's being metabolized. What are my energy systems? Cellular respiration is vital for me to understand how energy is being metabolized. What are my energy system demands? So this is what, at the crux of that sport-specific analysis is understanding the metabolic demands of my sport. My softball players, it's an incredibly hard sport in a very different way than wrestling is a very hard sport. The metabolic demands are almost completely juxtaposed, right? Very glycolytic for wrestling. Softball, their heart rate is never elevated. There's almost no glycolytic energy demands, right? They're alactic and they're aerobic. And pitchers and field players are going to be very different, but there's still almost no glycolytic demands. So if as a dietitian, I don't understand this, and I'm giving blanket recommendations, right? Oh, softball players, we want to practice, let's carb it. Maybe that's missing the mark, right? So I need to, if I'm going to help support them, I need to give them tools to be empowered to fuel strategically for the work required. My softball players need to have different recommendations, but I also have an opportunity to provide them in a way that is not food shaming, because that can be very difficult too. Oh, you're a softball player? You're not as active? Well, they have 4-hour practices, so they are active. But, oh, you're not as active, you're not getting the higher intensity, don't eat carbs. Or that can be internalized that way, and so we need to be very strategic around how we do that. So now, phase 2 is done. That's kind of the education, the training side of it. Now, how are we implementing? I gave some insights around body composition dashboards there. The execution. Physiology. So this is a great book if you're looking to understand some connection between nutrition and physiology. Bob Seebahar was first a physiologist turned dietitian. He works with USA Triathlon quite a bit and has a great framework. This metabolic flexibility framework was foundational when I knew about digging into it. And it's really about how are we targeting nutrition towards our energy system plans. Can we become more metabolically flexible? Built some models here at Virginia Tech. And this is something that was a big summer project last year. So Catapult was discussed. Right? You guys all know Catapult. Brock is a big fan, apparently. But we build out reports, and everybody can build out the Catapult reports a little bit different. And this is not specific to Catapult. Where we have a few different external load management systems at Virginia Tech. Each team kind of takes it on independently. Connexon we're moving to for volleyball. So this is volleyball data, actually. Oh, sorry, that's lacrosse data. But it's really independent. Workload data. We have high workload individuals, moderate, and low intensity or lower workload. And this is sometimes in practice, but oftentimes games, our athletes don't know how to feel. If I'm sitting on the bench versus if I'm playing the entire 90 minutes of a soccer match, how do I feel? The blanket recommendation is, it's game day, let's go fuel up with our carbs. That may not be beneficial to the student athlete, particularly over the course of the entire season. Right? We want to support them with energy availability, and that means adapting it based on their individual metabolic needs. So with that context, this is what we've done, and we have 4 different versions of this, and then we have kind of a summary at the end. Looking at our individual workload on the left, we have our performance plate. The USOPC came out with these performance plates maybe 20 years ago. They continue to be amazing resources. Thinking about building my plate based on my work requirements. Well, the messaging with the USOPC performance plates is, oh, this is a hard training day, a light training day, or a moderate training day. Well, we can dial that in using within-day energy balance, right? Within-day energy balance is a very powerful concept. But for pre-training, thinking about fueling for the work required, if I'm a starter, and really what we want to do is we want to fuel for the work we might do and recover for the work we did do. Does that make sense? Fuel for the work we may do, recover from the work we did do. So pre-game, if I'm a bench player, historically, I'm going to fuel for the next level up, like I might be a backup, right? Because that's the work that I may do. Probably not going to fuel as a starter, but you need to prepare for what you're going to potentially be exposed to. And then at the end, in the middle of the game and at the end of the game, or practice, you recover from what you actually did do. Okay? So this is pre-game. If you're in the right, you're getting a high performance plate with additional carbs, right? Like we just carb and carb, because you're going to be depleted regardless. If you're an intermediate player, you play as if, play for fuel for one level up from what you typically are doing. If you're a bench player, fuel for backup. So we have pre-game, pre-practice, intra-fuel. So our intra-fuel you can't really see, but like our fruit snacks, our gummy worms, those quick carbs, honey singer juice and gels, those are for our high intensity players. My bench player doesn't need to be doing it. Am I going to shame them if they select one of those because that's what they wanted that mode? I'm going to work really hard to educate coaches not to do that. But we also want to provide nutrients that are ideal and optimal for them. And that's going to be whole foods. It's going to be higher protein, higher fat. Because at the end of the day, that softball game, even for the bench player, between pregame and postgame meal is going to be 5 or 6 hours. They should be eating, right? They should not be shamed from going to the snack bin and grabbing a performance snack that is relevant for their particular needs. Right? That's intra-game. Recovery, right? Sugar, protein, post. If you trained hard, if you didn't, right? Let's get some protein and maybe a little fat. And then recovery is going to be fuel, recover from the work that you did. Summary here, this is actually a resource that's going out to our ASPDA membership, our sports nutrition group. This is summarizing macronutrient periodization. And we broke it down, my assistant director, Molly Miller, and I put this together. Actually gave some finishing edits yesterday. It should be like ready to go live, but essentially summarizing this by cycle, training phase, right? Macro, meso, and micro are cycles here. And thinking about it within day energy balance is our micro. Staying up with our energy demands over the course of the day, that's a really powerful tool and concept. Thinking about meeting our needs within a week, right? If this was a killer week and I'm redlining all week, well then my recovery day still needs carbs, it still needs energy, right? And then our macro cycle is thinking about, okay, what does a periodization require? So if this is my off season for softball. Right now, they just made it in the NCAA tournament, they went home. This is time to recover first. And then potentially, let's think about, this would be a time to work on some body recomposition, right? So thinking about it based on training days. Preseason, when I'm redlining, not the time to do it, right? Fueling for the training and recovery is what the name of the game is. Stakeholder involvement. The last part of this presentation is really about engaging folks like you. How do we engage folks like you? The way I conceptualize my job is I am right at the middle of everybody, right? I get to work with everybody. I get to work with operations, right? There's feeding, but I also get to work with director of ops. I get to work with people that they're kind of providing the resources to my student athletes. Right? We have a beautiful training table, so I get to work with that. I also get to work on the physical injury side, injury prevention, injury recovery. Yeah, all the things that I get to support my sports med staff. We have physiological development, like I just talked about, right? How do we interface with the training load, the training exposure, and the adaptation? And then on the psychological side, how are we preventing eating disorder? How are we treating eating disorder? How are we creating a team culture that supports an athlete to be whole and to show up every single day, focused on the things that support performance? Thing about it, when I first built this presentation, it was last summer. Tour de France is going on. I'm a huge fan. It's the crazy sport. One of the craziest sporting kind of achievements that I can think of. And we want to think about it as a team within that peloton. Right? When things get crazy, sometimes shit goes bad, goes sideways. And this is kind of like when teams are not communicating. This is about the team behind the team. And things can go sideways. But what we want to do is integrated team support is about proactive solutions to things that challenges that we can foresee, right? Not only communicating, but working collaboratively, proactively for the performance challenges that we can predict, right? How are we using body neutral or body positive language, right? Softball, I want to use body positive language. Baseball, we want to maybe work a little bit more body neutral because they're going to call themselves and each other fat and language that is maybe not as toxic as it would be in a women's team, but let's move that more towards neutral, right? They're going to continue to banter. To expect the baseball team to use all body positive language is probably not realistic, but how can we move towards a body neutrality type language? We want to be precise with our fueling, right? We talked about that. If my softball player doesn't have the tools, the knowledge, the understanding, and the resources to fuel for their metabolic demands, then they're either going to overfuel or underfuel. Both are going to have negative consequences, right? So we want to empower them to fuel in a way that meets their precise fueling demands. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
So let's say you're in season and you're going to do weekly weights, at least to try to maintain.
What sport?
Just say football.
Okay.
Or say soccer. Okay. Are you asking them to? They're losing weight, are you asking them to journal, or are you giving them pages as 3,000 calories and then through the week or two you see what their weight's at?
The question is if we're doing weekly weights and somebody's losing weight, are we giving them a meal plan? Yeah. I think we would maybe start by assessing how much they're eating and then trying to find strategically opportunities to increase what they're doing from there.
So have them journal and then you advise?
And yeah, I think doing a recall or journal and then building upon that is generally going to be the best starting point. Yeah. To just say, okay, this is your profile, you need this number of calories, is going to miss the mark in a lot of ways. So understanding what they're doing, are we trying to gain or lose based on this profile, and then building in fueling opportunities from there is how I would approach it. And I sense that we're getting low enough. I am wrapping here, but including stakeholders in nutrition education as much as I can. I want coaches, I want strength coaches, I want athletic trainers, because you guys are the nutrition ambassadors, right? So it empowers you to understand our messaging, understand red flags, make referrals, reinforce what we're doing. When we have interviews with candidates, we always ask them, okay, strength coach is giving us nutrition advice, how would you handle it? Well, I don't want that person to say, slap the strength coach on the wrist. Go understand, where is that nutrition information coming from? Where did you learn it? What was your approach? Why did you feel the need to do that? Those are the things that we need to be doing, because we need you guys in the field to be helping reinforce what we're doing. We're better reinforced than you guys are, than any of your programs I would imagine are. But we're still a fraction of our strength coaches involved with our athletes, and especially our athletic trainers. They need to be there reinforcing what we do if our message is going to be consistent. So we want to look more like kind of a pit crew, right? Everybody kind of has their role, we're doing our thing. And then if we can empower our colleagues here, like we've got a whole team. We're attacking, we're creating culture, we're supporting our student athletes holistically. Food and body as a culture we're inoculating messages. My volleyball team has a lot of challenges right now. They have athletes that are struggling with body image that have these messages. I have a volleyball player who's Asian, told her she needed to lose weight because nobody's going to want to sign her pro because she's too fat, right? Is that NIL? Sort of, but this is the environment. So what did she do? She leaned on her teammate. Teammate brought her in, supported, wrapped around. We're working on this, and this is not just coaches and strength coaches and support staff. This is the team culture. As Dr. Shelley and I were talking about, culture is inside out, right? The team is going to make the culture, and it needs to spread out from there. That's what I'm really, really hard about here. Interdepartmental, we use Teamwork AMS again. We track weight, so force plate data from counter movement jumps comes to nutrition. We get alerts, so we see deltas. And then we have alert systems, so I get an email whenever or the dietitian associated with the team sees. Doesn't mean we need to go say, Jane, why'd you lose weight, or why'd you gain weight? We can see this over time. We can see the trend. And this is an example of an athlete's trend line over time. So if any of you guys see this, you work with Teamwork AMS, you want to, I think we can kind of export these as templates, but this is how we use it. Shared data and alerts drive awareness, which drives communication and collaboration. We also built, I'll skip over this, not talk about this. We modeled a nutrition tracking dashboard after injury reports so that when we see an athlete or an athlete no-shows us or whatever it is, we document it in Teamwork AMS, that's where we document. And then this dashboard is something that we can PDF and send to our performance staff, something that we can bring up, they have access to it. So this is the way that passively or actively our performance staff is collaborating. This is really, really critical for us to support our student athletes around particularly the complexity of eating disorders. Transparency, coaches need to know what we're doing, support staff need to know what we're doing, athletes need to know what we're doing. So creating transparency in our approach, providing feedback loops so that when an athlete is referred to us, it's not a black box effect, right? That oftentimes happens. Well, we send them to the dietitian and nothing came back, or send them to site, nothing came back. We don't even know if they're there. Creating feedback loops. Thank you for the referral. They found their way to me. We're working on some stuff and we'll let you know if there's any way you can support it. So creating transparency and feedback and communication is key. We have what's called the Integrated Health and Performance Team. So this is like director level, coordinating the collaborative efforts across campus. So I can share more around that. But really, it's really a facilitation of all of the different collaborative efforts on campus. Just to summarize, building culture is critical. Being grounded in values of wanting to lean into this, seeking a deep understanding, building trust, building culture. Educate yourself. Obviously, I shared a lot of resources there. For those of you all, I would definitely invest time in understanding REDS, relative energy deficit sport, how that affects physiology and performance. Making that connection is so key. And then executing. Everybody's got different resources. Execute how you can, right? Collaborate. No technology is required to have a conversation. To send a text, create a group text with your collaborators, and be proactive around creating check-ins. Last thing here is they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? We've all heard this. Athletes feel this. Dietitians are oftentimes on the outside looking in. So we need to communicate that to athletes and teammates, coaches, parents, and performance collaborators, especially around culture related to food and body. That is it.
For strength coaches that have started the support system that want to facilitate constructive conversations with our commands, are there any certifications or educational platforms?
The question is for strength coaches that want to have more insight into metabolic demands and energy and the concept that we talked about here, resources. There are a lot of nutrition certifications. I wouldn't necessarily endorse any of them. I just don't know enough about them. I know Precision Nutrition and some others that seem to be pretty good. In terms of resources, there are incredible resources, handouts and things of that nature through the ASPCA website. So it's sportrd.org with a lot of nutrition, sport-specific handouts and nutrition information. So like that handout that we did on nutrition periodization, there's a dozen or so. Other resources. There are, there's a, My Sports Dietitian is doing, they have a free virtual conference that's coming up just in the next week or two. So I believe just called My Sports Dietitian. And they have a free conference that I think you have to pay to get CDs, but otherwise it's free to attend. And there's a lot of different.
This upcoming week.
Say again?
I'm pretty sure it's this upcoming week. I'm pretty sure it's this upcoming week.
This upcoming week.
I'm pretty sure. And it's free to sign up and just like listen. But if you want credits and things like that, again, process. Sure.
Any other resources you would think of, Alyssa?
I think there's the scan, QPTN, eatright.org.
There's the,
but I think, what?
There's the Echo Project, which is actually in New York.
Mhm.
Rochester. It's all different. It's every other Tuesday. Or the first and third Tuesday.
That's eating disorder related?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really, I've been doing it. It's really quite fun.
And then the USLPC has some nutrition resources as well.
Yeah, USOPC has a lot of free resources as well.
Precision Nutrition is really strength coach friendly.
Okay. Obviously, was that precision?
Precision is very strength coach friendly.
Okay. Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I work with strength coaches that have done it, and oftentimes it's been a great conduit for collaboration. Strength coaches that are working with dietitians, like, of course, lean on your dietitian, understanding the lanes, that's really important. But if you're a strength coach that doesn't have those resources, upskilling yourself is really vital. And it sounds like that's a really good option. Yeah.
I just have one question, because I know I've been in this position. If we're at a place who doesn't have a dietitian, right? You're at this position. We're, as strength and conditioning coaches, a sport coach may ask us to do body comps, or provide body comps, or provide weight. If you're in the middle as a performance professional with a sport coach without that presence of a dietitian, what would your guidance be in that person?
That's a really great question, and obviously this is very triggering. Body composition can be just so complex. My first consideration is seeking to understand what the importance is being placed on body composition, right? Is it a checkpoint, or is this a way to fat shame our kids into eating better, which maybe that's not the limiting factor because all the performance lifestyles are shit. Is it an opportunity to track over time? What are we focusing on, right? Reframing a little bit, and even if you're doing skin, pinches and skin caliper, those can be very valuable. If some of 3, some of 7, those can be very valuable as long as we're treating it with a performance mindset. I think trying to reframe it into, okay, are we assessing how is our training and recovery being kind of adapted into the athlete and the performance, or are we seeking some other outcome with that body composition assessment? So using the tools around you, right? Skinfold is probably the lowest tech. BIA is pretty accessible, but understanding first, the reason, how is that information going to be communicated? And then also communicating, the error that exists so that we're not overemphasizing any single data point.
Is it too cynical to say you probably shouldn't do it? Like, I know I've seen it used more negative than positive.
I think keeping an open mind is important. So we all know saying no to a sport coach can be hard and also can shut down future opportunities. So I think seeking to understand is the first step. When I was here, some transparency. When I was here, I was very anti-body composition. There are the eating disorder risk at Cornell University is extremely high because of the type A personality profile that is so high risk for eating disorder. And so I was pretty adamant against it. And so I would need to be convinced that this is going to be positive and productive. But keeping an open mind around that, I think, is important, particularly if you're working with a nationally competitive pole vaulter and just the body composition shouldn't be done. I think you're going to close doors rather than I think the cost benefit of that may not be in your favor. So understanding how is it being utilized, how is it relevant, is going to be a critical starting point. But potentially your default would be no, and then you got to be convinced otherwise. Great question, Jay.
Would you utilize your framework again over at like a smaller institution, right? There's certain sports that we do utilize it for and other things, right? And that information generally, for the most part, is stayed within house with the strength and conditioning, just because we match up with a lot of the metrics we take, right?
Yeah.
Looking at that, would you utilize those same tiers in terms of the sports that you'd be a little bit more comfortable with in terms of not getting the same backlash, respectively? I mean, we have force plates, we're fortunate, right? We don't even have to do it at this point because we kind of just get that influx of info, right? But that's more just in terms of sharing information with the athletes and how we portray it, just making sure we're using language that kind of aligns along with the tiers that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether you're managing the information internally and it's just different metrics that you're sharing with the athlete, how you communicate about it to the athlete, I think that's super relevant. Coaches may or may not coaches don't need that information, but is it potentially relevant to have conversations around it with coaches? I think for those very low risk sports, potentially, but even like the tier 2 and obviously tier 3, which is weight sensitive, I would certainly be considerate of the language and how that's shared. But philosophically, I think it matches up regardless.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And speaking of nutrition, it is lunchtime.